seems really amazing is that they are bothering to deal with individuals that really don't seem to have any actual bearing on, national security or, investigations of any kind, quasi-terrorism, even power, access to power, whatever it is. In other words, why they would point a satellite at someone for such a sort of a superficial thing.
Well, in my mind, I think that smacks more of experimentation than anything else. I know most governments are trying to move toward a new one world government or new world order type of system. My own theory, and I have nothing to back this up except just looking at this from a logical perspective, you can only control the population with guns and taxes to so much of an extent. I mean, there will always be people that escape some control from tax and from guns. With this technology, you can control everyone. I don't know if you know, with the 2010 census coming up, they're using GPS for the first time in history. Their plan is to have GPS coordinates on every structure that houses human beings. And if you look at that in context with what we're talking about, well, I mean, they can see inside your house, they can alter your behavior, they can alter your thoughts, they can attack you with weapons, and now they know exactly where every person is with coordinates. It sure looks like it's experimentation. And the other thing that leads me to that belief, you're right, most of the people are just everyday, ordinary people with really no bearing on political power or political direction. There are some whistleblowers and some people that are involved in big lawsuits, either on the court side of it or one of the plaintiffs that are being victimized by this. But they're the minority. The majority of the people are housewives, doctors, lawyers, inventors, from every walk of life. There's a lady here who's a social worker. I mean, one of the nicest people you'd ever want to meet, being terrorized.
Incredible. So I wonder if there's, obviously this would be sort of an intense thing to do, but if there might be a sort of profile that one could draw up that links these people in any way, shape, or form, a vulnerability, some proclivity to being able to be manipulated in this way. And I know that from what I saw on your website, that you're actually now writing a book on how to protect oneself. And I'm thinking that in the process of that there again might be some kind of marker, some kind of proclivity. I do understand the outlier concept in terms of vulnerability, but I'm thinking in terms of actual targeting for their purposes. In other words, are they really getting a random sample, or are they actually targeting a certain group with certain markers?
Well, one theory, in talking to a former DARPA scientist who worked on some of this technology, one theory on that is that basically everyone is controllable with this technology except a small subset of people, and the small subset that aren't controllable are the ones being harassed and discredited. That's one theory, and that's a pretty scary theory. Through Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance, we have done surveys on upwards of 600, 700 people to look for similarities between victims, to look for that magic thing that you're talking about, that one marker or one occupation or one like or dislike that everybody across the board has, and it's just not there. It's totally random. Now, what we have found through surveys is that 70% of the victims are female, between 35 and 55, and living alone, whether single or divorced and living alone. So a lot of what's going on is sexual assault based, and that's kind of what lends us to believe that this is agency sterile experimentation, where basically criminal groups like big PI groups and large law firms who use PIs have been given access to this technology and have been given carte blanche use of it to victimize whoever they want, while the government sits back and takes notes. Because what they found is that it's a good tool or weapon to use to commit rape.
Well, okay, but what this leads to, in my mind anyway, especially the use, the sexual side of it, is what goes on with the normal, if there could be such a thing, normal mind control victims that have come forward, like Candy Jones and so on, who are in fact turned into agents where they use sex to break down the walls, and to create the altars. And so it may be that, and I don't know if you've gone down this road because I haven't read your book, though I'd certainly like to, is basically if they're doing this using sex, then they actually have, in other words, it's not the sex in and of itself, it's what the sex can allow them to have access to within the personality. And if they create the altars, if they're able to actually create, as you say, using somebody's in their house alone into an agent, basically, for them to go out and to do whatever they wish at whatever time, get on a plane, fly to a certain place, then they've basically created an agent using satellite technology.
No, and that I'm sure goes on. That's gone on for a long time, and you're right. Sex as a tool for that purpose has been going on for a very long time. Now, what we found, and at least in most of the victims we've talked to, they don't seem to be getting used as an agent for anything outlandish. It does seem to be strictly almost experimental in that they're just seeing, how long it takes to break a person, how long it takes to get you fired from your job and discredited by a psychiatrist who diagnoses you as delusional. And like I said, in the sexual part of it, at least in the cases that we've identified and talked to and found out where the source is, like here in San Antonio, these guys they're not creating agents. They're just harassing people and raping who they can.
Right, but there may be different levels. In other words,
there definitely is.
You're accessing, in other words, the most pragmatic, for lack of a better word, level in which you've got, these people that are on the ground, given it's like being given a toy to play with, and then, as you said, that the people above that are basically sitting back and taking notes. Perhaps that's actually what is going on. But on the other hand, you have to, take it up another, because, you're talking to Project Camelot, so, you have to understand where we go with stuff like this. But generally, because of what we know and because of the kind of people that we're interacting with, there is in other words, there's a much larger plan, and that it does have basically not only political probably portent, but it goes beyond that to where we're talking about sort of running the world and using agents and or people that may be turned and they may be manipulated to actually work in, and this is possibly very outlandish to even suggest, but I'm going to throw it out anyway, which is in the astral plane. In other words, the people themselves will know they're harassed in the real world, in their everyday lives and so on and so forth. They will have, their barriers broken down. But basically, what actually they do with it and do with these people may actually happen in other realities. And I know that, that may not be a place you want to go. But it has an interesting bearing on what is going on here, because I have to say that just knowing what I know, and the rabbit hole goes very deep. There is ultimately a plan and an agenda, and we just released an interview with somebody who's basically talking about being in a room with these people who do literally run the world, and I have to say that that their plans are pretty extensive, and that's an understatement.
No, and I agree with you there, and I have delved a little bit into some of that, and that's obviously where this technology is taking us. There would be no other reason for it. The thing that I see, most of these victims have been victimized for some of them a decade or